Hey guys, tonight we travel back, way back, to the tepid, waxy underworld of ancient Rome. You're not a gladiator, you're not even a senator. You, my friend, are a candle maker. The air smells faintly of goat and regret, and your hands are already sticky with yesterday's wax. You trudge through the narrow, cobbled streets before dawn. The lanterns are still flickering, casting sleepy orange halos onto the worn stone walls. The city is oddly quiet at this hour, save for the occasional bark of a stray dog or the splash of a chamber pot being dumped from an upper window. Keep your eyes up, or down, depending on what you'd rather avoid. Your feet ache before you even reach your workshop. It's a small, soot-smudged space tucked between a dye merchant and a man who sells suspiciously unlabeled ointments. No signage, just the smell, your smell. Candle making isn't for the faint of nose. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not post your city and local time in the comments? I love knowing who's dozing off where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the wooden door with your elbow, arms full of bundled reeds and a pouch of beeswax. Inside, the air is warm and thick, the walls darkened by years of smoking oil and the clingy scent of tallow. You've already resigned yourself to the fact that your toga will never truly stop smelling like meat candles. The first task is always the wicks. You sit on your worn stool and start braiding thin lengths of papyrus and flax. Each one must be the perfect thickness, or the candle will sputter, smoke, or do that thing where it suddenly dies out just when someone's trying to read about crop taxation. Again, outside, the sun begins to rise. Not that you'll be seeing much of it. You'll spend most of today hunched over clay pots and fire-heated molds. Your only view a cracked window with a smudge of sky and one very judgmental pigeon. You used to dream of being a scribe. Remember, sitting in a cool library, transcribing epics, sipping watered wine. Instead, you're here, muttering to yourself about wick length and soot buildup. The dream lives on, just slightly singed. Still, the work has its rhythms. You've learned how to heat the wax just shy of boiling, to test the consistency with a finger and a hiss, to pour it into molds without making too much of a mess. Too much, being relative. There's wax on your sandals, your sleeve, your ear. Don't ask how it got there. By mid-morning, your fingers are already slick with beeswax and soot. Your back aches from leaning over the firepit. And you haven't even gotten to the fun part, ladling boiling fat. Candle makers of Rome typically worked with three main materials: beeswax for the fancy folks, tallow, rendered animal fat, for the rest, and, if you're feeling frisky, the occasional lump of imported whale oil. Wealthy patrons might commission sweet-smelling beeswax candles for temple offerings or bathhouse lighting. But let's be real, you mostly cater to the tallow crowd. Which means your mornings smell like a mix between a butcher's shop and a forest fire. You keep a cloth over your nose, but it does absolutely nothing. You're not sure if your nose has grown numb or simply given up. Historians still argue whether Roman candle makers had dedicated guilds or simply shared trade secrets over cups of lukewarm barley beer. You suspect the latter, mostly because your neighbor keeps trying to peek into your workshop and whisper something about adding honey to the wax. You're not sure if he's helpful or hallucinating. Sometimes, you pass the time by humming. Sometimes, you just narrate your process in a quiet, sing-song voice, pretending someone cares. And now, you mutter as you scrape congealed wax from a mold. We see the elusive half-burnt nub. Majestic. There's something oddly meditative about it all. The repetition, the scent, the flicker of candlelight against the walls. You wonder what your ancestors would think, great warriors. Probably, if they saw you now, delicately balancing a spoonful of pig fat over an open flame. But hey, someone's got to light the world. Midday approaches, your stomach growls, and you nibble on a hunk of barley bread while watching a stray cat sneak into the shop. It eyes you like you owe it money. You toss it a crumb. It looks unimpressed. Outside, a neighbor is shouting about fish. Another one's arguing about laundry. You briefly consider running away to join the amphora carriers or maybe the men who play flutes at funerals. But then again, flutes are hard to clean. And you already own all this wax. Sometimes, in your better moods, you imagine a future where people marvel at candle makers. Museums, perhaps, little plaques that say, "This humble artisan once lit the path for priests, poets, and lovers alike." You smile at the thought. Then you spill a pot of warm wax down your leg and forget all about it. By the time the sun begins its slow descent, you finish the first batch, dozens of stubby, lumpy candles, lined up like tired little soldiers on the shelf. Not perfect, but good enough for a baker's back room or a chicken vendor's midnight snacks. You stretch. Your spine makes an audible noise. You pretend it's fine. Outside, the city glows gold. You breathe in the air, part smoke, part sweat, part something faintly floral that you hope isn't just the soapmaker's latest experiment wafting through the wall. Tomorrow, you'll start again. More wicks, more wax, more soot. But for now, you sit in the doorway of your shop, holding a small beeswax candle in your hand. You light it, watch it flicker, and think, maybe it's not such a bad life. A quiet life, a warm one, even if you still smell like a roasted goat. Your nights aren't glamorous either. You don't return home to some marble villa with reclining couches and flute music. No, you shuffle into your cramped one-room apartment above a bakery. The air permanently infused with stale flour and disappointment. The floor creaks with every step. And the ceiling leaks during heavy rain, which, in Rome, is often just the universe rinsing off its mistakes. You hang your wax-smeared tunic on the hook by the door. Though, hook, might be too generous a term for the bent nail you hammered in 3 summers ago. Your bed is a straw mattress that squeaks when you breathe too hard. It smells like someone once tried to pickle turnips in it. You try not to think about that. You light one of your own candles, not a fancy one. Just a stumpy thing you poured from leftover tallow and a wick made from old rope. It flickers wildly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. In this dim glow, everything feels softer, a little less like failure and more like a lifestyle choice. Some nights, you journal, not in the "Dear Diary, today I bested a lion" sort of way. More like, "Note, customer complained candle smelled like goat. Assured her that was normal. But it's your ritual, that and staring at the ceiling. Wondering whether it's too late to reinvent yourself as a philosopher. You've been in the business for over a decade. Which means you've lived through wax shortages. Tallow that smelled so bad it made a priest vomit mid-sermon. And a particularly dark week when a rat chewed through all your wicks. That rat was never seen again. You don't ask questions anymore. You remember the time a wealthy widow commissioned 30 beeswax candles for a funeral procession. She wanted them shaped like doves. Doves. You spent 3 sleepless nights melting and remolding wings that kept looking more like overcooked turnips than birds. But she cried at the sight of them. Said they were soulful. You've never figured out if that was a compliment or a polite Roman insult. Candle makers aren't revered. You're background noise. You're the guy people only think about when the sun goes down or someone's trying to hide their late-night reading from their spouse. Still, you hear whispers of candle fame. There's a workshop across the river that allegedly makes perfumed candles, lavender and myrrh and something called noble ash. You're not sure if that's real or if someone's just bad at naming things. Historians still argue whether such luxury candles were actually used widely, or if they were more like party favors for bored aristocrats. You're leaning toward the latter. One time, a noblewoman asked if you could make a candle shaped like her late husband's bust. You said no. She cried. Then she gave you double. You said yes. It didn't look like him. But she still seemed pleased. Probably cathartic. You sigh, stretch, and crawl into bed, the mattress crunching beneath you. Outside, Rome hums. Somewhere, a couple argues. Somewhere, a chariot rumbles by. And somewhere, a candle you made is burning. dim and steady, lighting the face of a sleepy merchant tallying up grain shipments by lamplight. You don't dream often, but when you do, it's never about candles. It's about the sea. You've never seen it, but in your mind it's vast and cool and smells like things that haven't been dead for days. You dream of standing on a ship. The wind in your hair. No wax in your fingernails. Just freedom, and maybe a mild sunburn. But morning always comes. It always smells like smoke and old bread. And you always wake up feeling like your spine's been replaced with salted driftwood. You wash your face with cold water from a cracked basin and chew on the same hard barley bread you fell asleep with in your hand. Breakfast of champions. You head back to the workshop before sunrise. This morning, a neighborhood kid is sitting on your doorstep. He's maybe 9, scrawny, with a tunic that used to be white but now looks like it's seen some things. He asks if you'll teach him the trade. You tell him no. He asks again. You sigh. Eventually, you let him sweep the floor. He's awful at it, somehow kicks more soot into the air than onto the dustpan. You name him Lucius, because he refuses to give his real name. Claims it's cursed. You don't press. Lucius becomes a regular fixture. He's not helpful, exactly, but he brings a weird energy to the workshop, humming out of tune. Pretending the candles are soldiers going to war, asking very inappropriate questions about where wax comes from. You tell him about bees. He doesn't believe you. Over time, you teach him a few basics. How to twist a decent wick. How to tell when the tallow is ready without sticking a finger in it. A lesson learned the hard way. You tell him that candle making is 70% patience, 20% burns, and 10% not breathing too deeply. One day he asks why you do it. Why not run away, become a sailor, or a gladiator, or literally anything else? You look at your stained hands, the smoke-streaked walls, the crooked shelves of stubby candles. And then you tell him the truth. You don't know. Maybe it's habit, maybe it's comfort, or maybe you're just stubborn. He nods like that makes perfect sense. Then he asks if he can make a candle shaped like a dog. You say no. He tries anyway. It looks like a diseased potato. Quirky fact, some Roman households believed beeswax candles warded off evil spirits. Not tallow though, too impure. You think about that every time a customer insists on tallow for cost-saving purposes. You say nothing. Let the spirits sort it out. The day drags on, and Lucius eventually leaves after burning his sleeve. You work late, refilling molds, trimming wicks, and stacking finished candles into neat pyramids. It's not art, but it's something. The light outside fades, and you light one of your better beeswax candles. It glows warm and steady, casting shadows that don't feel as lonely anymore. You think about how many nights like this you've lived through, how many you might still have. And maybe it's not a grand life, but it's a life, and it flickers on, just like the flame. The days blend into each other like wax in a melting pot, thick, slow, indistinguishable. You wake up, your back screaming in protest, and go through the same motions, cold splash to the face, barley bread that could chip teeth, and then the short walk to the workshop, where the soot welcomes you like an old frenemy. You settle in, tallow rendering first, your least favorite part. The smell hits you hard, like warm socks that have been simmering in regret. Boiled animal fat has a fragrance that not even the most desperate street perfumer could bottle. You've gotten used to it, mostly. As you stir the bubbling cauldron, Lucius bursts through the door, carrying a small crate of what he claims are premium rat-free wicks. You don't ask where he got them. You simply take the box and hand him a pair of gloves, if only to minimize the number of things he touches. Today is market day, which means one thing: special orders. People want fancy, people want sentimental, people want impractical. You have a list scribbled on waxed parchment with smudged requests like candle shaped like baby's foot, extra long candle for dramatic monologue, and, your personal favorite, emergency light in case husband snores too loud again. You begin pouring molds while Lucius pretends to organize shelves, humming some out-of-key Roman marching tune. You glance at him and mutter, It's not music if it hurts people. He shrugs and starts stacking candle stubs into a pyramid. A neighbor pokes her head in. She needs a rush order, 5 beeswax columns for her cousin's wedding tonight. She stresses that they must not smell like disappointment. You assure her they won't, unless her cousin already does. Fun fact: weddings in ancient Rome often included torches or candles as part of the ceremony, not just for light, but as symbols of warmth and fertility. Or at least, that's what people like to believe. Historians still argue whether this was a common tradition or more of an upper-class affectation. You just know it means overtime for you. You set Lucius to work polishing the molds while you check your dwindling beeswax supply. Beeswax is the gold standard. Cleaner burn, nicer smell, and allegedly good for summoning the gods, assuming the gods care about ambience. But beeswax is also expensive. You once tried bartering for it with a local apiarist, offering candles in exchange. He gave you a look that suggested he'd rather be stung to death than light one of your creations. As you pour the wedding candles, your hands fall into that muscle memory rhythm: tilt, fill, tap, repeat. You've done this so many times your fingers operate on instinct. You could probably do it blindfolded, though that's not a challenge you plan to accept. Lucius watches for a moment and asks, "Do you ever get tired of it?" You pause. "Every day," you say, then add, "but not enough to stop." Outside, Rome bustles. Street vendors shout about olives and cheap tunics. Somewhere, a drunk man is serenading a chicken. You catch a whiff of garum, the infamous fermented fish sauce, floating through the window like a slap to the nostrils. Another customer enters, clutching a waxy scroll. He wants memorial candles for his father, who always smelled of pine and poor decisions. You suggest sandalwood. He nods solemnly. You've gotten good at reading people. Not in a deep, spiritual way, just in the, this person's going to argue about price, kind of way. You smile the way merchants do when they're already mentally increasing your bill. Lucius continues pestering you with questions. Why do you heat the wax like that? Why does the wick have to be scented? Can I eat this one if I'm really hungry? You tell him the answers: consistency, balance, and absolutely not. You decide to teach him about wick placement. He fumbles with the string and gets it stuck to his elbow. You sigh. It's a process. A bit of trivia you picked up at some point: Roman candle makers used a variety of materials for wicks, including papyrus, flax, and even old linen. You prefer twisted flax. Burns cleaner, less chance of accidentally setting someone's toga on fire. Which happened once. It was not your best week. By mid-afternoon, your hands are sore and your patience is wearing thin. You've delivered the wedding candles, started on the memorials, and even managed to sculpt something that vaguely resembles a foot for that one odd order. You squint at it and decide it looks more like a melted sandal. Close enough. Lucius has taken to drawing faces on candle stubs with charcoal. You tell him to stop. He draws one that looks suspiciously like you and gives it a unibrow. You give him a look that communicates 1,000 disappointments. The sun starts to dip. And you're still pouring. Your tunic is stiff with wax splashes. Your fingers have small burns. Your mind is foggy, but you push on. Then, a surprise, the local priest stops by. He's here for altar candles. Says they're for the gods, not aesthetics, but he still inspects each one like he's judging fruit at the forum. You give him the good batch. He doesn't thank you. You're used to that. Sometimes you wonder if the gods appreciate your work. If they sit up on Mount Olympus, nodding approvingly at your even burn rates and clean wicks. Then you remember how often your ceiling leaks and figure they probably don't. As twilight settles over the city, you finally close the shop. You and Lucius sit on the stoop outside, watching people drift by. He asks you if candles ever talk to each other when no one's looking. You say no. He doesn't believe you. He heads home, and you linger a little longer, looking at the faint glow of your own candles in neighboring windows. You think about how your hands have shaped so many lights for other people. Yet your own world remains flickering and dim. But then you remind yourself, There's a strange kind of dignity in that. In being the light behind the scenes. You stand, stretch, and head back inside. One more night in the glow of your own making. The next morning, you're greeted not by the smell of bread or even boiling wax, but by the acrid, unmistakable scent of burnt something. You rush into the workshop, only to find a half-melted candle sitting alone on the worktable. Smoldering quietly, Lucius is crouched nearby, fanning it with a tile shard like he's trying to resuscitate a dying pigeon. "I was testing a new wick design," he says, as if that explains the smoke damage now kissing the edge of your inventory shelf. You stare at him. He grins. You briefly consider lighting him instead. You sigh, open the shuttered window, and let the early Roman airflow in, damp, dusty, and laced with the scent of donkey sweat and time. You get to work before your patience completely melts. Today is different, though. You've been summoned, not by a customer, but by the Collegium Candeli, the official guild of candlemakers. Sounds impressive, isn't? It's mostly a group of older men who argue about wick thickness and which temple gives the best seasonal contracts. You arrive at their meeting house, which looks as grand as a municipal bathhouse until you get inside and realize it smells like wet chalk and discontent. You sit at the back, trying not to draw attention, which doesn't work because you forgot to change your tunic and you're still speckled in beeswax. A man named Publius, whose eyebrows deserve their own zip code, begins droning about candle taxes. You drift, your mind goes elsewhere. You wonder, who made the first candle? Historians still argue whether it was the Egyptians, the Chinese, or early Etruscans who first twisted plant fiber into a flame-holding tool. Doesn't matter, you just know it wasn't you, and you're glad. You wouldn't want that responsibility pinned on your resume. Eventually, the meeting devolves into a shouting match about whether temple contracts should be pooled or individually secured. One guild elder insists the gods care deeply about symmetrical candle placement. Another says, if Jupiter's so picky, he can buy his own wax. The room laughs. You try to sneak out. But no such luck. You're noticed. You're called on to share your insights as a working artisan. The crowd quiets. You panic. You stand up slowly and mutter something about consistency in craftsmanship and honoring the flame. Someone claps. You're not sure if they're being sarcastic, but you bow anyway and escape before anyone can nominate you for something. Back at the shop, Lucius is nowhere to be seen. Good, that probably means he's not starting another experimental candle that smells like triumph. You take a moment to just sit. There's something about silence in a room that usually hisses with wax and smoke. It feels earned. A small knock at the door pulls you back. A girl, maybe 10 years old, stands there with a clay lamp clutched to her chest. She wants to trade it for a candle. Says her family's tired of refilling oil every 2 nights. You study the lamp. It's cracked, but charming, probably handmade. You trade her for a small taper. No charge. She smiles like you just gave her a pet tiger. You watch her skip off and wonder how long it'll take for the wax to melt unevenly. Probably 3 hours. Sometimes, this job surprises you. You return to your latest project, sculpted novelty candles. Yes, truly the pinnacle of ancient Roman artistry. You've been commissioned to craft one shaped like a gladiator helmet and another that resembles a plump fish. Apparently, there's a dinner party theme. You don't ask. This is where the job becomes something different. You shift from producer to artist, or at least artisan. You dig out your clay molds, your carving tools, and your most reluctant patience. Wax is tricky. Too soft and it slumps. Too cold and it cracks. It's like sculpting butter in a warm room, with fewer compliments. As you carve, your fingers sticky and eyes narrowed. You remember a strange tidbit someone once told you, that certain Roman elites believed candles could trap the souls of the dead if extinguished improperly. You're not sure if it's true, but you always blow out candles with a certain amount of guilt now. Lucius returns carrying a bundle of reeds. You ask why. He says he's designing a reed wick revolution. You tell him reed wicks were tried and rejected centuries ago. He nods sagely and mutters, "Then we're due for a comeback." You decide not to respond. Later, a courier arrives with a scroll sealed in red wax. You break it open and squint. It's a formal invitation to provide candles for a senator's funeral. High honor, better pay, awful mood. You accept, of course. Not because of the honor, or even the money, but because a funeral means stable orders, rows of identical, solemn tapers, no fish, no baby's feet. You begin preparation that night. Even as the city dims and distant flutes echo through alleyways, you stir the wax, level the molds, and breathe in the familiar scent of rendered fat and rosemary-infused smoke. It's strange how a job so repetitive, so unremarkable, could be this grounding. As you clean up, Lucius asks what you'd want your own funeral candle to look like. You tell him, just a regular one, but make it slightly taller than everyone else's. He nods, like that's a completely reasonable request. Then he asks, "Do you ever wish you made something people remembered?" You look at your calloused hands, your burned tunic, the soot in your fingernails. Then you say, "Sometimes, but mostly, I just want 'em to see in the dark." Outside, the moon glows pale above the terracotta rooftops, casting long shadows through narrow alleys. Somewhere, a candle you made flickers behind a curtained window, dancing quietly against the night. It's not much, but maybe it's enough. You're back at the bench before dawn, fingers already sticky with wax and the faint regret of too little sleep. There's no rooster crowing in your part of Rome, just the predictable squeal of a neighbor's rusted gate and a merchant hawking questionable olives. But today's no ordinary day in your less than legendary candle career. Today, you're crafting funeral candles for a Roman senator, and the weight of that formality presses on you like a badly made toga. You examine the order scroll again. It's painfully specific, 50 ivory tapers, unscented, precisely 20 fingers tall, made from the finest tallow, no beeswax. Because apparently the deceased was humble in death, rich enough for gold-trimmed sandals. But sure, let's honor him with cow-fat candles. You chop and render and stir, the pot bubbling like a cauldron of disappointment. The smell is somewhere between burning hair and boiled broth. And as the steam rises, you wonder, not for the first time, how your life turned out this way. Lucius enters, bleary-eyed and balancing a tray of olives and flatbread, which he's already half finished. "You know," he says through a mouthful, "Romans believed funeral candles lit the path to the afterlife." You grunt, "I hope it's a short walk." He smirks and points at a congealing glob in the wax pot. "That one looks like Emperor Claudius's chin." You don't laugh. You're too busy trying to skim impurities while maintaining a temperature that would make a sunburn jealous. And yet, there's a rhythm to it, like muscle memory or slow dance steps in a heatwave. By midday, your workshop smells aggressively like a livestock market after a thunderstorm. You open both shutters and toss a few pine branches onto the brazier in a desperate attempt at aromatherapy. Doesn't help. You sneeze. Wax splatters. The candles are finally poured, and you begin trimming wicks with a bronze knife that's gone slightly dull. As you line them up, tall and grave and oddly beautiful, you remember a strange theory you heard once, something whispered over a tavern table between half-drunk historians. That the reason Romans used candles in funerals was not for light, but to ward off spirits who feared fire. Historians still argue whether candles were meant to honor the dead or scare them away. You kind of hope it's the latter. Makes your job sound more heroic. That night, you deliver the candles to the domus of the deceased. The household is draped in black. Servants weeping into their sleeves like someone just stepped on a sacred chicken. The family doesn't thank you. They're too busy mourning or pretending to mourn. You place each taper along the marble corridors, one after another, their flames quivering as if nervous to be part of such a solemn scene. One of the younger mourners eyes the candles, then whispers to his brother, "They're not crooked this time." You resist the urge to bow. As you exit, the sun dips behind the hills. casting a golden blush across the city. Rome never quite sleeps, but it slows, just enough to breathe. You pass a statue of Minerva and nod at her out of habit. She never nods back, but you suspect she might be judging your candle symmetry. The next day brings a different commission: scented candles for a wedding. You've never hated love more. You remember last time, someone requested rose petals mixed into the wax. They clogged every mold. Your shop smelled like a perfumed battlefield for days. This time, they want citrus and myrrh. Together, you hesitate, then remind yourself that clients pay. And your opinions don't. You soak peels in warm oil, crush the brittle flakes of myrrh, and stir everything into the fresh beeswax you finally got from your cousin's apiary, at a family discount, which somehow cost more than market price. Lucius is at the back, scribbling something in charcoal on the wall. "What are you doing?" you ask. "Designing a logo," he replies, "for when we expand." You glance at the messy sketch, a candle shaped like a lion eating a grape. "Why?" "Symbolism," he says with a grin. "Strength, sweetness, flame." You just shake your head and turn back to your scented chaos. You line the molds with thin strips of linen for clean release. You pour the mixture carefully, each little vessel holding the warm, fragrant promise of slightly better romance. You never thought your life would involve this much delicate pouring. But here you are, part craftsman, part Cupid's assistant. While the wax sets, you allow yourself a moment outside. The street is humming now, vendors selling dates, dogs chasing chickens, some boy loudly failing to play a flute. You lean against the warm stone wall and inhale the distant scent of garum stew. Not great, but at least it's not tallow. Back inside, the candles have cooled. You pop them out of their molds like stubborn teeth and pack them neatly in linen-lined boxes. Each one bears a small pressed stamp you invented, a circle enclosing a single flame. You like it, understated. Unlike Lucius's lion, that evening, the bride-to-be herself visits the shop. She's overdressed and underwhelmed. "I was told there would be shimmer," she says. You show her the myrrh dust flecks. "It glows when lit," you explain. She peers closely. Acceptable." Then she leaves without paying, saying her father will send coin. You don't even blink. That's Rome. Glitter before gratitude. Later, Lucius lights one of the leftover wedding candles and places it between you. It does shimmer, faintly, like fire caught in amber. You watch the way the flame curves in the draft, how the wax forms miniature cliffs as it melts. You say nothing, neither does he, and for a moment, it's enough. Then he breaks the silence. "What if we made candles shaped like vegetables?" You sigh. "Cornea candle," he adds. "You can't tell me that's not genius." You tell him to go home. He grins and blows out the flame. Wisps of citrus myrrh smoke curl upward, like sleepy serpents dancing toward the rafters. And once again, in the dim quiet of your workshop, you realize, no one will write songs about you, or carve your face into marble. But when night falls over Rome and your candles glow quietly in windows and temples and even the homes of the absurdly wealthy, you are, very briefly, everywhere. Not bad for someone who spends most of their time covered in wax. You're halfway through lunch, bread, cheese, and a fig that's probably older than you, when a courier bursts in. Panting like he just outrun Vesuvius, he waves a scroll tied in imperial red ribbon. That alone tells you it's trouble. You unroll it slowly, chewing as you read. A decree from the Praetorian Guard. Apparently, there's a military celebration planned at the Field of Mars, and your workshop has been humbly selected to provide ceremonial candles for the honor march. Lucius peeks over your shoulder. Humbly selected means unpaid, right? You don't answer. You're already doing the math. 2 days to craft 100 large torches. Half the time they usually take to set properly. And these aren't dainty little wedding tapers. We're talking full-on shoulder-height parade torches. The kind of candle that doubles as a weapon if the celebration turns sour. Still, you don't have much of a choice. You begin melting vats of wax so quickly your ceiling sweats. Tallow, of course, They're not spending beeswax on soldiers. You stir in pitch to make it burn longer, thicker, smells like a goat caught fire in a pine forest. Do you think they'll notice if we dilute the mix? Lucius asks, ladling with one hand and eyeing the bubbling pot like it might spit at him. They noticed when we used olive oil last time. Fair. By evening, your shop looks like a siege engine exploded. Stacks of thick reeds bound for wicks. Splashes of tar on the floor. And your left sandal fused permanently to a cooling puddle. You pry it free with a slow squelch and keep working. Sleep will not be attending tonight's festivities. The first torch emerges at sunrise, long, ugly, and perfect. You test it in the alley, lighting it as a pair of elderly neighbors pass. They squint at the flame, mutter something about Roman excess, and shuffle away. Validation. In its purest form. As the day grinds forward, your arms start to ache in that dull, almost noble way. There's something satisfying about lifting these ridiculous monuments of fire, like you're preparing the sun for its evening debut. Midday brings a surprise visit from a historian, not a normal customer. This one's robed in layered linen, ink-stained fingers, wide eyes like he's perpetually discovering a conspiracy. I'm researching ritual fire, he says, barely introducing himself before diving in. Did you know early Roman candles were sometimes used to mimic lightning during ceremonies? Lucius raises an eyebrow. You mean, to fake Jupiter's temper? Exactly. The man cackles. Primitive pyrotechnics. Fascinating, isn't it? You nod vaguely, handing him a partially finished torch as a souvenir. He's thrilled. As he leaves, Lucius whispers, I bet he thinks we're sacred engineers now. You chuckle, then immediately regret using those muscles. By nightfall, your hands look like gnarled wax sculptures. You deliver the torches in bundles to the parade organizers, who don't even offer a thank you, just a grunt and a scribble on a wooden ledger. You stay to watch the beginning of the procession. The soldiers march in perfect rhythm, faces stoic, torches held like spears of burning honor. The crowd roars. Somewhere, a child waves a palm frond like it's a sword. And in that moment, as your torches blaze across the field of Mars, you feel something weird. Is it pride, or are you just exhausted? Later, as you return home, Lucius says, imagine if they gave medals for candle work. You nod. Mine would be shaped like a wax spill. The next morning, your arms are noodles. You plan to rest, but the gods laugh. A patrician servant is waiting at your door, holding a wax bust of Jupiter, melted. Sir Publius is furious. The boy squeaks. Your votive candle didn't survive the midday heat. He demands a replacement, with less sagging. You sigh. You remember that order, a Jupiter-shaped candle meant for private prayer. You told them not to keep it in the sun. But apparently, divine instructions mean nothing when rich people are involved. You accept the challenge, remaking a wax god with noble cheekbones and a thunderbolt that won't slump like wet pasta. Lucius suggests a wick in the beard, for dramatic effect. No, you mutter, carving out eyebrows that are almost too expressive. Fine, but it'd be memorable. By mid-afternoon, Jupiter looks more like himself and less like a waxy raisin. You dust him with powdered charcoal to give the stormy complexion the client wanted. Ridiculous, but again, paid ridiculousness. As you box up the celestial bust, you overhear two passers-by arguing about temple offerings. One insists candles are now more meaningful than burnt meat. The other calls it lazy worship. Historians still argue whether candles overtook animal sacrifice out of practicality, or because no one wanted to keep scrubbing blood off altars. Either way, your business is booming. To celebrate, Lucius makes you a cup of wine mixed with honey and something unidentifiable. You pretend to drink it. He's too busy trying to balance Jupiter's head on a bowl to notice. That night, you watch a lone flame dance on your table, casting long shadows that jitter against the cracked walls. It's not much, just a stubby leftover from the senator's funeral batch, but there's something hypnotic in its stubborn glow. You lean back, let the flicker blur your vision. And think of all the places your candles now live. Altars, processions, love ceremonies, death rites, lopsided statues. No one chants your name in the forums. No fresco immortalizes your sweat-stained tunic. And yet, in homes across Rome, people sit a little longer in the dark because of something you made. It's not glory, but it's something.